Now, our next speaker, friend of mine, longtime intactivist, human rights activist, civil rights activist, founder of GALDEF, Genital, Autonomy, Legal Defense and Education Fund, is going to be talking about GALDEF's work in also supporting impact litigation. As we've seen, Tim Hammond's been a lifelong advocate for equal rights among the gay and lesbian LGBTQIA community. And we've seen enormous successes there. I'll be talking tomorrow more about how we want to emulate that movement. Tim's been on the ground floor for decades, and we're very, very happy to have him join us. So Tim, give a round of applause for Tim Hammond.
The question is often posed to me, why are there so many gay people in the movement? Why are you always doing outreach at pride festivals? Well, the fact is that the gay community has always been oppressed by medicine and religion. They've both tried to control our sexuality and, in a certain sense, tried to eradicate us. Just as they've tried to eradicate homosexuality, religion and medicine have been trying to eradicate the foreskin. So I just wanted to begin with that. Before I talk a little bit about GALDEF, I want to share a little bit of my history in other social change movements to help answer the burning question that's on the minds of a lot of intactivists these days. Who the hell is Tim Hammond? And why should I care what he says? Given my past history, I have to let you know this isn't my first rodeo. I thought I'd take a few minutes to share my history with you and then take you on a tour of the GALDEF website and its organization and resources. As a teenager in the 1970s, I came out and realized the importance of lobbying legislators on certain issues. At that time, it was the Vietnam War, and it was the Equal Rights Amendment. So the irony is not lost on me why I'm here today now talking about equal rights, but this time equal rights for men, boys, intersex children, and transgender people. So when I came out as a teenager, I immediately became heavily involved in the gay rights movement in my hometown of Rochester, New York, yay Rochester. I moved to San Francisco in 1983 and worked for an agency serving the psychosocial and psychosexual needs of men who were affected by a new and devastating disease called GRID, gay-related immunodeficiency disease. We now call it AIDS. So when the times called for it, I realized another important aspect of social change, and that's civil disobedience. In 1987, I was arrested on the steps of the US Supreme Court, along with hundreds of others, as we protested their Bowers v. Hardwick decision upholding the state of Georgia's sodomy law that criminalized private same-sex behavior between consenting adults. I continued my fight for equality by taking a high-profile stand in the media to speak out for the legal recognition of same-sex binational couples like myself and my German partner at the time. But by far, my biggest investment of time and effort in any cause has been with the genital autonomy movement. I began that journey in 1989 when I co-founded a group to help circumcision sufferers known as the National Organization of Restoring Men, or NORM, along with Wayne Griffiths and Jim Bigelow, both of whom sadly are no longer with us. I also worked on an almost daily basis with Marilyn Milos of NoCirc. With Marilyn's encouragement, in 1992, I founded No Harm, the national organization to halt the abuse and routine mutilation of males, which staged targeted protests around the country and was the predecessor to today's highly successful Bloodstained Men. As in any social movement, addressing the needs of those adversely affected by an injustice and empowering them to speak their truth and giving them a voice is essential to success. So knowing that video is another vital component of influencing social change, I've produced the world's first social issue documentary on circumcision, Whose Body, Whose Rights, which aired in 1995 on PBS stations across the country and is now the only circumcision documentary in the US Library of Congress and the American Archive of Public Broadcasting. Those broadcasts were met with overwhelmingly positive viewer response. And one PBS affiliate, KQED in San Francisco, shared their viewer phone logs and letters with me. And there's one particularly prescient letter that we received from this person here who basically questioned, can you imagine this becoming a political issue? Here we are, documenting the harm of discrimination and exposing unfair treatment and injustice is another major component that drives social change. That's why between 1989 and 2023, I published 3 large-scale harm documentation surveys to give a voice to circumcision sufferers and foreskin restorers. During that time, another important voice arose to condemn this injustice. That was Dr. Thomas Szasz, whose Jewish family fled Hungary to the United States, where he became professor of psychiatry at the State University of New York at Syracuse. In 1996, he wrote that infant circumcision is wrong a priori because it rests on the absurd premise that the only mammal which is not healthy until it's immediately operated on at birth is the human male. He asked, why is routine neonatal circumcision legal? Because it's defined as preventive medicine. Why is it defined as preventive medicine? To avoid having to ban it as male genital mutilation. Dr. Szasz told me in a private conversation that he opposed any legislation that selects women out from the rest because FGM laws further legitimize male genital cutting as, quote, circumcision and not, quote, genital mutilation. Some years later, I would find additional encouragement for ending MGM from another Jewish scholar. In April 2022, I took the risk of emailing Lawrence Tribe. He's professor of constitutional law at Harvard University. I asked him about challenging the federal FGM statute because it violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Now, please understand, Tribe didn't know who I was. He didn't know who the hell Tim Hammond was. But I introduced myself as a gay rights pioneer, citing my earlier arrest at the US Supreme Court, and I praised his previous legal work on many gay rights cases. The very next day, he emailed me back to say that, like me, he found the gender-based protections of the federal FGM law to be an affront to gender equality and said it was legally unsustainable. He recommended that, rather than starting at the top, we should follow the path chosen by many successful civil rights movements and file legal challenges at the state level, working our way up to the federal courts. This, of course, is the precise path that Eric and his team are pursuing here in Oregon. So when it comes to how society, legislatures, and the courts respond to demands for equality, one of the most powerful motivators for change can be those led by attorneys. And in the case of male genital mutilation, it's my firm belief that doctors will relent when attorneys find ways to block the financial incentives for circumcision and to level the playing field for all doctors to abide by the same rules. This encouraging conversation with Professor Tribe inspired my next step, to take a lesson from the Gay Rights Playbook and create an organization in which doctors can be challenged by the only people that I think they fear the most, attorneys. So, like my friend Joe McCormick here, I was an early member of Lambda Legal Defense and Education Fund. Now, LDEFs have been used by almost every civil and human rights group in recent history to advance the rights of their constituents. In 1975, Lambda had the bold idea that lawyers could band together to create impact litigation to fight for equality for gay people. And by the way, if you're not familiar with the term impact litigation consists of any groundbreaking legal case that fundamentally changes the legal landscape on a given issue. So Lambda's founders believed that not only did oppressive laws need to be challenged, but that existing laws needed to be expanded to protect people from discrimination based on sexual orientation. They formed a cooperating attorneys network for this purpose, and they set about to raise the money necessary for all kinds of impact litigation, from challenging discrimination in employment, the military, immigration, and public accommodations, to advancing changes in hospital visitation rights, adoption, and marriage equality. So again, in early 2022, I took another risk and reached out to Kevin Jennings, the current executive director of Lambda Legal. Knowing that Kevin makes twice-yearly visits to Palm Springs, where I live, to raise money from the local gay community to support Lambda's work, I requested a few moments of his valuable time, and Kevin graciously agreed to meet me at a local coffee shop. After establishing my credentials as a gay rights pioneer, I asked him for his opinion about starting a Lambda-style organization to fight circumcision in the courts. When he asked, does this group have a name, I very proudly responded, GALDEF, the Genital Autonomy Legal Defense and Education Fund. Well, since I didn't know what his position was on this issue, I held my breath for what seemed like an eternity, waiting for his response. Then suddenly, genital autonomy, why not call it what it is, genital mutilation? So needless to say, he thought this was a valuable idea, and we've since been in touch on several occasions, and it's my goal to form an alliance between GALDEF, Intact Global, and Lambda Legal. Myself and my co-founders formed GALDEF to educate and support both attorneys and plaintiffs with the information, resources, and financial means to win MGM cases. I should say that all of our directors serve in a volunteer capacity, and none of us, including myself, receive any salary whatsoever. So with this history out of the way, I want to take you on a tour of our website and to highlight some of our programs and resources that I'm hoping you'll find valuable and useful, which might help you to see the ways that GALDEF is both similar to and different from Intact Global. So this is our vision and mission statement. Our vision is quite simple: to create a world in which the right of everyone to bodily integrity and the freedom to choose what's done to their genitals is legally protected on an equal basis. And we have 3 simple points to our mission, which is to compile the educational resources needed for the legal community, to bring them up to speed on what the issues are, to support attorneys and plaintiffs to launch impact litigation, and to raise the funds necessary to support the financial costs of litigation. We do also have a value statement, which is to promote solidarity with female and intersex victims of genital cutting, and we recognize that some transgender people have also been harmed by penile circumcision. We recognize that diversity and inclusivity makes us stronger. We're committed to promoting equality for all people, and we oppose all forms of discrimination. We have 0 tolerance for prejudicial and divisive speech or deeds, and we're a proud endorser of the statement opposing anti-Semitism within the genital autonomy movement. We do also have an advisory council, and we formed that not too long ago, primarily to get advice and guidance on our various policy decisions and strategies. And here I'm proud of the fact that the advisory council includes non-binary individuals like Perry and Allie here. And here's why. All of us here understand that male infants and children in the U.S. are at high risk of genital mutilation. But there are other categories of children affected by penile circumcision who are often overlooked and with whom I believe we need to make common cause. One such group is intersex persons. Many people think that being intersex is only about having non-binary genitalia, but it can involve other physical, hormonal, and chromosomal differences that can manifest by having gender-typical genitalia on the outside and non-conforming organs on the inside. For example, having a penis, but also having a uterus and ovaries. But by the mere fact that an intersex child is born in the U.S. with a penis, they too can be subjected to forced circumcision and can identify as being a circumcision sufferer. Another affected group is transgender girls. These are individuals who are born with male typical genitalia and are later diagnosed with gender dysphoria. Again, by the mere fact that they're born in the US with a penis, they too are often subjected to forced circumcision. This imposes an added burden if they eventually seek vaginoplasty. They're missing 15 square inches of erogenous foreskin tissue that the surgeon could have used to create a more functional neovagina. In fact, my latest survey of almost 1,800 foreskin restorers, 1.5% of the respondents identified themselves as being transgender females. And in our survey, we had an area for open comments, and I have to tell you that one of my favorite comments came from a transgender woman who said, quote, "Yeah, a trans woman restoring her dick. Wild, right?" So GALDEF is grateful for its allyship with our non-binary, intersex, and transgender friends. So let's make more individuals from those communities feel welcome, as they too have been adversely affected by forced penile circumcision. We also have a page here devoted to resources for attorneys, and this page is meant to provide a variety of published articles, videos, books, and experts to help attorneys become better educated on the subject of MGM and win more cases. The Articles tab lists published articles chronologically from 1984 to the present. They're coded according to law, medicine, human rights, ethics, and so on. Each entry includes a salient pull quote to help readers quickly discern the gist of the article, and each article is a downloadable PDF of that article itself. So this is a great place to do homework, especially if you need to find a pithy quote to support your arguments. One tab that I want to call your attention to is the anti-trans tab. Now, I'm not sure how many of you realize this, but almost every bill that has been proposed or passed by a state legislature to prohibit what sponsors call genital mutilation of children targets the 1% of the population of consenting trans teens who have an official psychiatric diagnosis of gender dysphoria. But these bills specifically exempt newborn circumcision from the definition of mutilation. A custom, we all know, it's a custom that lacks a medical diagnosis, but it affects tens or hundreds of thousands of non-consenting male newborns each year in those states, children who are mutilated with no credible medical diagnosis. So it's my hope that more creative minds than mine could perhaps find a legal means to challenge these exemptions or use the exemptions to invalidate the very bills themselves. Moving along, we also have a page for our very own Cooperating Attorney Network Directory and Outreach, what we call our Can-Do program. This page is dedicated to creating an army of lawyers, like Eric Klopper, David Llewellyn, and others. And this year, we'll begin to do active outreach to law firms, law schools, and legal trade journals. We have a specific page dedicated to educating visitors about the rationale behind an equal protection lawsuit. This page is intended for attorneys and activists alike. It's quite lengthy, and I encourage you to take a look at it when you have a moment. I do want to draw your attention to the fact that this page contains a highly informative list of 17 FAQs. They answer some of the most common questions people might have about protecting children from penile circumcision. For example, FAQ number 15 addresses the myth that circumcision is somehow like vaccination. When you click the plus sign, the answer opens up discussing how to respond to such misinformation. We also address other questions like parents' rights, religious freedom, whether an equal protection challenge is anti-feminist, and whether a victory on our part would drive the practice underground. This page also gives visitors who want to be considered as a plaintiff in a lawsuit the opportunity to complete and submit a form for that purpose. We respond to all submitted forms, and each is evaluated for its potential to be part of impact litigation. Now, earlier I mentioned that part of GALDEF's mission is to raise the funds for plaintiffs. Our page on litigation assistance grants explains how plaintiffs and/or their attorneys can apply for such a grant. When a request is received, it will be evaluated by a grant selection review committee consisting of attorneys and GALDEF board members. This is to ensure that we wisely allocate the donor's funds to only those cases with a high probability of victory. So in the interest of financial transparency, I'm pleased to tell you that GALDEF has a policy of allocating 80% of all donations that we receive to our litigation fund, reserving 20% for operating expenses. So by far, between phases 1 and 2 of our litigation fundraising, we've had generous donors making donations to help us secure over $48,000 towards impact litigation, and $10,000 of which GALDEF has already pledged to Intact Global's Oregon case. And I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that earlier this year we received 2 very generous contributions from 2 of our supporters, Jeff Borg and Martin Navoa here. So when we're not allocating funds for litigation, how else do we spend our money? Well, we produce videos for our YouTube channel, and we also have a news blog that you can find under the top level media tab. Our blog is frequently updated with current events at GALDEF, and one recurring event to which we're pleased to commit our funds is having a booth at Pride festivals in Palm Springs, Los Angeles, and for the moment here in Portland again this year. At each event, we talk with literally hundreds of Pride goers to explain why children's genital autonomy is important. Most festival attendees immediately get the concept, especially since the queer community has a history of suffering human rights violations from medicine and religion. And at these events, we offer, by donation, our unique and always popular handmade Pride, intersex, and transgender roses. We often work closely with Intact Global in staffing our information booths. So you might be wondering, how do we fund all of this? How do we get the money for our grants and pay for our operating expenses? Well, we have a wide variety of ways to give. This includes bank-to-bank transfers via Zelle, mailing a check, PayPal, credit or debit cards, or buying our merchandise from our Zazzle store. Some donors give through their employer matching gift programs. Others give through a donor-advised fund. Our account with endowment lets supporters donate their crypto, stocks, and mutual funds. For donors who are age 72 or better, who have an IRA, and must take out required minimum distributions each year, they can reduce their capital gains burden by donating part or all of their RMD to GALDEF. And in a final act of generosity, forward-looking donors can bequeath a legacy gift to us in their will. So like Intact Global, GALDEF is only as strong as the involvement it receives from the intactivist community. In addition to funding, we have other needs where we welcome your help. We are looking to increase our board with more diversity, more young people, people of color, women, people from cutting communities like Jewish, Muslim, Filipino, Korean. We are looking to expand our advisory council with more physicians, lawyers, and human rights activists. We have a grant selection review committee, but we need more lawyers to help join us and help us to determine and examine where people are submitting grant requests and which ones are eligible to receive the money. We need fundraising help. We need people who are passionate about raising money and who have the skills to do that. We need a social media coordinator to help us coordinate our presence across various platforms. And most of all, we need courageous attorneys. We need people from the fields of family law, equal rights law, constitutional law, consumer protection, all of those people who have specialized expertise in those fields to help bring about cases that would be appropriate for those fields of practice. Here I want to play a brief but extremely important excerpt from Lambda Legal's inaugural podcast. It's a valuable reminder to me, and I hope to all of you, about what Eric and his team will need from the rest of us. And let's hope this works. Nope, it didn't. I'll do my best impression of a lesbian lawyer here who was quoting from this. She was saying that you can have the best legal arguments in the world inside the courtroom, but if you're not doing the work outside of the courtroom so that people can be receptive to what the issues are, she believes that you have to influence the wider public, and judges are just members of the general public. So you have to help them understand, too, what the issues are. So you need to create the conditions in which people can rethink things that they thought they always knew. And that was certainly true of gay rights in the 70s and 80s and 90s and early 2000s, and it's certainly true of our issue, I believe. I have some tips for how to work best outside of the courtroom. And these are just my personal beliefs. You may disagree with them, but I believe it's not enough to shout into a social media echo chamber. You need to step outside of your internet bubble and your comfort zone and work for change in real life. You need to lecture less. Maybe ask questions more. Ask the question, are human males the only mammal that needs immediate surgical correction at birth? Always focus on autonomy. Most people support letting others make their own choices about their bodies. You can come out as a genital autonomy advocate to everyone you know and relate this issue to other issues of bodily autonomy, to other issues of choice and freedom. And here I'll go off script a little bit. Coming out is so important. I'm always amazed at the number of people that I meet that are not out about this issue to their family and friends. When I was a young gay man, Harvey Milk was my hero. Harvey Milk was the first openly gay elected public official in the US. He ran several times for Board of Supervisors in San Francisco. He finally won. Tragically, after about a year, he was assassinated along with Mayor George Moscone by another member of the Board of Supervisors who just happened to be a white Christian evangelical. But Harvey said, he always related this story about having received a letter from a young gay man in Altoona, Pennsylvania, who wrote to Harvey and said, "You are my idol, you are my role model, and you give me hope that things can change." And that was his slogan. He said, you gotta give them hope. And I feel that's absolutely true for this movement, which leads me to the final point here. Speak your truth about your harm. No one can argue with your lived experience. And there are younger circumcision sufferers out there who need to know that they're not alone. And it's up to all of us to give them hope. Because after all, we are the shoulders that these future genital autonomy advocates will stand on. So I'll close by reminding you that you can stay updated with the GalDef newsletter by subscribing from our homepage. And remember, circumcision is not healthcare. Plain and simple. Circumcision is not healthcare. And I think we need to remember that we need to protect every child, and we need to let children be as they are. Thank you.